Welcome to the Freedom CEO podcast. It's about becoming the chief decision maker over your life in order to step into a life of freedom. From business, health, wealth, charity, and giving back to just doing life on your own terms. I am your host, Shae. I am an award-winning activist, change maker, and a multi-facet impact entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in business, philanthropy, and health and wellness. In this space, I'm going to be bringing you insights, not just from me, but from incredible thought leaders around the globe to help you start making decisions towards living a life of freedom so you can live a life you love. Are you ready, guys? Because we are going all in. Today's episode is going to speak to the powerhouse that is within you. I got to sit down with Vanessa Ford, who is an award-winning film and TV producer, scientist, entrepreneur, and in general, she is such a badass. Seriously, check this out. While earning a master's of tropical medicine, global health from Oxford University and working part-time as a model, Vanessa is currently the chief brand officer of female-led entertainment startup Kukua and executive producer of their first African kids superhero series, Super Sema, which has attracted over 100 million views worldwide. The franchise has expanded to toys, books, and consumer products to inspire kids to be change makers like Sema. Vanessa's work has been featured on the covers of Forbes Africa magazine, Canadian Business's top Canadian entrepreneurs to watch in 2022, as well as Bloomberg, Washington Post, Variety, Essence, People magazine, Apple's App Store, CNN, just to name a few. All of this to say with her accomplishments, she still counts her highest achievement as being a mother to her 3 children, Rio, Easton, and Monroe. And she is a very proud Jamaican. She is on the cover of Forbes Africa, being named 3 of the most inspiring women making a difference. She's also named as the top entrepreneur of 2022 by Canadian Business Magazine. And she's known as an entertainment mogul. For me, one of the most closest and dearest women to my heart, also known to me as that, Vanessa Ford, joining me today on the Freedom CEO podcast. V, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
It is, I was thinking about this leading up to our conversation that, many of you don't know this about Vanessa and myself, but we met when we were about 11 years old in the Muskoka region in Toronto. It's like 3 hours north. And who would have known that at 11 or 12 years old, we would be sitting here today and I would be having the honor of chatting and gaining insights from one of my dearest friends who just came off of the cover of Forbes magazine in Africa. Like, unbelievable. Right?
Yeah, it is unbelievable. But in a way, it was also so clear and meant to be. We were the 2 people also, if you don't remember, that got chosen to stand back and spend extra time at the place we were and because we showed such potential as leaders, they asked us to stay back and join the junior group that was helping to lead some of the younger kids. So in a way, out of the 100 kids there, you and I getting chosen together to have that extra couple weeks of experience kind of also was a bit of a sign to pointing to the future as to, what we can achieve and the direction we were already going at 11 and 12. So I think, in a way, it was a bit of a testament.
Yeah, you're probably not wrong in that. And I just think it was such a special shaping and molding time for both of us. And you have had such an incredible journey since then. I remember the day that you called me to be like, I'm leaving Toronto and I'm moving over to London. I'm going to Oxford. I'm like, wow, this girl is so much smarter than me. Literally, I'm like, Oxford. Wow. Okay. I'm like looking at U of Miami, Hawaii Pacific University, which, that's where I ended up going.
Yeah.
I'm like, dang, I should have applied to like Stanford or something.
Oh my gosh. It's so funny because so many people looked at that whole opportunity in that way, like, oh my gosh, Vanessa, like you are just too smart, too overachieving, too out there. And so many people also were just like, you know, I wouldn't even apply to Oxford. Like, why don't you go to U of T? It's a really good school and, you can definitely get in. Like, why are you shooting so big? But yeah, my mom always says, if you don't shoot for the stars, then you'll never land on the moon. So I was like, I gotta at least give it a try. So I remember that reaction from you. Although you definitely were very cool and nonchalant about it. You were kind of like, oh, Oxford, that's great.
Yeah, as if like everybody gets accepted into Oxford. Definitely not. No, I just, and from that young age, and even still now, like you've always been that inspiration of anything is possible. And, and we're going to talk some about, the work that you have done even in your early years. But, at one point you had your first son, who I remember watching you go through that at one point, being a single mom through that and going, so many people would not be able to juggle and handle what you did, or they would give up on their own dreams. And you really didn't. It wasn't easy. I know that for you, it wasn't easy, but you made it work and you persevered. And that shows a lot of the testament to not just your own vision for yourself, but also like the belief in yourself, that it is all possible. And it's why you are sitting where you are today. And I'm grateful for you being here to bring us on some of that journey. So I would love, let's start there. Let's start, Vanessa Ford getting accepted into Oxford. You grew up in Toronto, just outside of Toronto, your Jamaican heritage background that you are very proud of, and rightfully so. How did you, like, in that moment, feeling that, and then I'm going to say being released from the nest? Like, what were you thinking? What was the plan then?
So the plan was to go and save the world from AIDS. I had this dream that I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to focus on tropical medicine, specifically so I could help a lot of people. So I didn't want to work in a fancy clinic in Rosedale. I wanted to be in Africa in a clinic working and focusing on large scale public health problems. Specifically, HIV was my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, growing up to Jamaican parents in Canada, you're kind of living in between these two worlds all the time where, you come home and you smell Jamaican food, you listen to patois, you hear dominoes banging on the table, you hear reggae music, and then you go out to the rest of the world. And I went to French immersion school, so I was very much kind of one of the only people of color in this whole school. It was still diverse, but it was just, there was no other Jamaicans there. And I just remember kind of always feeling like I was living in between many different worlds. and having to adapt into those worlds and fit in and find my voice and find myself within those different environments. And then especially deciding to study science, it was even more polarizing because, I mean, at least at the time, there was very few young Black women in sciences. I never had a teacher that looked like me. I never had classmates that look like me. And it's one of those things that it doesn't matter, but it's just this constant kind of subtle thing where you're kind of the always the other, the one and the only, the, you know, and over time it kind of builds up this sense of resilience, I think, and just wanting to, just really wanting to like make a mark and prove myself. So I think when I got to Oxford, I really wanted to come into my own and was really excited to kind of finally be in a space where I was like, okay, maybe I'm not the only kind of young Black woman who wants to also save the world. And I was really excited to meet other people from my community. I was really excited to just do everything that I set out to do in those couple of years. I just realized, you know, when you know there's a clear beginning and end to whatever experience you're going to have. And I just wanted to make the most out of it. So I went in there kind of with all of my, just everything that I had, and kind of left the world of, you know, the comforts of GTA and and all the familiarities, my friends. And not that I wasn't going to come back, but I definitely left and never looked back, so to speak. I always knew where I came from, but I was also like, had all my focus and attention ready to, you know, conquer Oxford and to make a move as this young Jamaican Canadian in this space. So that was the energy that really I was focused on when I went there. Now, when I started the program, I realized, well, there was some other young Black phenomenons definitely in the program and in my world, but it wasn't enough. And I started doing research and also realizing how some of the decisions were being made. I did an internship at the World Health Organization in Geneva, and I couldn't believe that how, you know, the decisions for these massive, you know, healthcare systems were being made by predominantly older white men sitting in offices in Geneva and going to, you know, different countries for 2 weeks, and then kind of deciding the entire healthcare plan, the entire funding opportunities, you know, everything was just being decided in a couple of weeks by people who didn't live there, people who weren't, you know, intimately connected to the community. It was mind-blowing. And it was at that moment where something changed. You know, this dream of kind of going into clinics and saving the world I realized was impossible, because there's a systematic problem of where the money is coming from and how it's being used and who actually making the bigger decisions that affect these healthcare systems. So I really realized that I needed to find another way to spread awareness and to make change. And that was when I got bit by the filmmaking bug and storytelling and seeing the power of stories and moving image in order to change behavior. And that kind of reframed everything for me. And it didn't happen overnight, but it was something that I took a big risk in school. I did my dissertation, and when most people are handing in a 35-page essay, I handed in a film. So I took a totally different approach. I went into Kenya, into Swaziland and South Africa, living with Indigenous communities, filming the work that I was doing, and put a story together that could show from, without being that outsider narrating, but almost just like a visual dialogue and a visual journal of everything that was happening. And that actually became more powerful than, the 35 essay I could have ever written. There's something so powerful when you can connect someone to who's not a number, but you see their face. They're no longer just written in the books of statistics. They have a name, they have a family, and it was so powerful to be able to distill, my research in that way, because I realized, oh my goodness, this is actually, we had a little screening at the university, and then I started being asked to show it at film clubs, and I submitted it to a couple film festivals, and I realized, the outpour was unbelievable. Like, people were just so fascinated and interested, people who didn't really know much about the HIV pandemic, or they had a totally different kind of one-sided approach. And they were like, wow, here is this community who is remote in Africa, and this is how they're dealing with it. This is how it came into the community. It wasn't a poverty thing. It wasn't, it was a very specific conversation that I was trying to create. And that, it was incredible to be able to do that, and to really connect people who are not just in the public health world, people who are not just in kind of an interest in Africa, but people who are also watching Marvel films, and people who, barely knew anything about the pandemic other than what they saw, in on the TV or what they read. And so this gave them, it humanized the disease. And I think I realized at that point that, filmmaking was such a powerful medium, and I needed to keep doing more of it. But I'm like, now I have this degree from Oxford, and I've just spent a lot of money, specializing in tropical medicine. How am I going to go from there to film? And without the proper last name, without the family who's been working in film for 3 generations, without the trust fund to live in New York full time and just intern.
Yes.
So I think that was that moment when it came, it really hit me, and it was terrifying, to have worked so hard to get this incredible degree, and then realize, what, my heart is telling me that I'm meant for something bigger, and to do something different at that time. So yeah, I think the whole experience at Oxford was incredibly uplifting. It was so much fun. I've had, the best memories of my life there. But it was also a moment of fear, and, very few people talk about that. There's this constant kind of illusion that when you graduate, you know exactly what you're going to do. You have this nice shiny degree. But there is like that terrifying moment of really trying to hustle and figure out, what that next step is. And it's not always as easy as they show in the movies.
100%. And, I have 2 questions for you, actually. One, before I ask you this question around fear, did you ask the university for permission prior to making the film rather than writing the essay? Or did you ask for forgiveness after the fact in hoping that your quote unquote essay would get accepted, or at least given the opportunity to be received, like as an essay, but in a film format?
Yeah, no, so I asked permission first, but I didn't go out there planning on using film. So it was actually my mentor who said, Vanessa, you need to do something with this footage. So at Oxford, you're assigned a mentor in your program. So it's always a professor, who's highly esteemed, who you're paired with, who may have a similar interest or study field. And I had filmed all of this footage just for myself. So just to help inform my research. I was still planning on writing, the 35-page essay or dissertation. But it was when I got back and I started showing him snippets of, a male circumcision ceremony, or like us sitting around eating, or, my conversation with the traditional medical doctor that they use in this particular village. And he was just blown away. He was like, Vanessa, I don't think people have ever seen this view of, this is specifically the Maasai community in Kenya. And, he felt that some of the footage that I captured was really just one of a kind and extremely rich material that can be highly educational. And he was like, Vanessa, you need to do something with this. And he connected me to the Oxford Film Club, which is this like film society, mainly with, liberal arts students who are studying theater, and they were the ones who kind of helped me to, edit the footage together and create and find the story within it that I wanted to tell. So actually, I didn't ask for permission, but having showed him that piece of work, he gave me that permission in a way, or just said, you need to run with this. I still wrote a dissertation, so I still handed in something, but I had this like dual form. I had, the long, boring essay, which you have to defend. And then I had the actual, this rich kind of visual, I call it a visual meditation, because again, there's no narration. I didn't want it to be like the Westerners kind of, and here are the African community and going to I really wanted it to just be like, allow the viewer to have their own interpretation as much as possible. So it was just some translations to understand the language a little bit more clearly, but in a way, it ended up being kind of the most important piece of work that I've ever did out of that time at Oxford, and the work that I'm most proud of, and the work that ended up traveling the furthest. Many dissertations just get buried in a journal article, or in a book. And I'm proud to say that not only was my article published, but I have this beautiful piece of work that then hundreds of thousands of people have now seen. The university still uses, and the David Suzuki channel in Canada also televised. So it's something that I'm really proud of, and something that I just really encourage more people, and especially students, to think outside of the box, and maybe do things differently, find other ways of communicating some of the same things that have been told and shared, like even just taking it to another level, and looking at the visual form, looking at a dance form, music. There's so many different ways to connect to different audiences, and I think that film really showed me how I could do that with filmmaking.
Totally. And like, I hear the story and I hear the journey, and it reminds me of when we do easy things, you don't get big results oftentimes, right? Like even like think about trying to go to the gym to like lose weight or get in better shape. If you do what's easy, maybe going only once a week, not eating as good, you're not going to get big results. You know, you might see little change, but it's change that's maybe noticeable to you or just a few people around you. But if you really want to make big change, big impact, get big results, then oftentimes what scares us the most or what is the hardest is the answer. It is the path that you should be going down. And you said you did your dissertation anyways. It would have been easier to go, yes, I have this footage, but it's not what's going to allow me to pass. I need to still submit a dissertation. So the easier route would have been to do the paper and not spend what I would think is hours, probably hundreds of hours in editing with a team, people re-editing, going back and forth, then the effort of showing it to the university, setting up a viewing, then submitting it to festivals. There's so many things here where it just would have been easier for you to submit the paper and do what was required. And yet instead, you know, you are following part of your heart and your passion, but in doing what was outside of the box required more work, more effort, more time, more dedication. And knowing where you sit today, which we're going to unpack that a little more, it's hard to know, and we don't know if you would be where you are today as a producer and a filmmaker had you not chosen the harder or the more work route and you just submitted it in dissertation, right? Like, who knows?
Yeah, totally. That is definitely something that when you think back, you know, that experience was the one thing that really shook me to my core. And in terms of, and it was my biggest learning curve. You know, I was naturally quite gifted at the maths and sciences. So in a way, you know, a lot of what I was learning at Oxford was interesting and new and relevant, but ironically, it turned out that making this film was, you know, even more work. And I would have to take the bus down to London to take classes at the London Film Academy, where I was doing this kind of 6-week crash course in filmmaking in order to. So I was taking buses back and forth every weekend when everyone else was like partying or sleeping, and and actually thinking about it was absolutely mad and crazy to do what I did. But you're right. Like when you are following your passion, it just feels, the easy way just feels also like a shortcut, and you don't take shortcuts when you're doing something that you love and that you want to do properly. And so I think there was this feeling of like the whole journey of, you know, having created the film, the journey of my mentor being blown away by it, the journey of then learning about filmmaking, meeting new people from kind of the theater world and the film world and storytelling world at Oxford. That whole path of going through that was so much more meaningful, even more meaningful than the end result almost. And so yeah, it opened up my world so much. You know, some of those people that I met along in that period ended up being very helpful and instrumental in my, you know, as I grew into making filmmaking and television producing like my vocation. So in a way, it all, you know, the director and founder of the London Film Academy is one of my best friends, to, you know, and became a very, you know, a mentor as I was growing and navigating the industry. So everything happens for a reason. And, you know, sometimes, as you said, taking that easy route doesn't always lead you to the place that's the most exciting, the most disruptive.
Totally. And okay, so like, let's go to New York for a second, because there's 2 times in your story where easy was on the table. Easy was the option. And, you're now in New York, and you mentioned, a few minutes ago around fear, not having a trust fund baby account to like front your New York lifestyle and living an internship. And there's multiple roadblocks that, again, the easy route would have been to maybe go back to Toronto or go back to London and do something else. And fear can be very, very paralyzing in that way as well, right? So you've got the fear with these excuses. Then there's the real monetary, maybe setbacks. And yet you, again, decided to persevere and find a way. And I say very often in life, we either make excuses or we make it happen. And rather than getting stuck on the now what, it's how, right? Like you focused on the how can I make this happen versus like, I don't know what to do. And I want to tap into that because there's so much value there for people, because if they just tried and they persevered and they focused on the how, that their life on the other side could completely and radically change into everything they've ever wanted and dreamt for themselves. And you're living that life from my viewpoint, like you're truly living your dream. So
yeah, I mean, at that point, when I graduated, I also had my first son, Rio. So he was born just as I graduated, and at the University of Oxford Hospital. And I think knowing that for me, there was no plan B. There was no way that I could not fail. Like my stakes were really high at this point of knowing that, okay, I'm going to change careers. I have, a child to take care of. I have a little person to inspire and to feed and to make sure that they are healthy and happy. So if I'm going to make this kind of cataclysm change in my career, it has to be an incredible opportunity, but there's no way that I can't succeed. And I think in a way, when you have that kind of insatiable drive and you don't have a plan B, and you can't afford to have a plan B, you find ways where those ways didn't exist before. And you create paths and you create relationships and you not just work hard, but you work smart. Like I was so efficient with every moment of my time because I knew that for me, I had a period, I gave myself, 6 months in order to really find something in the film world that really spoke to me. And for me, it was a lot of luck that got me into the door of one of the biggest, mini major studios in the world at the time. But as they say, luck is also when opportunity meets preparation. And somehow I think it was what I do remember the CEO of the company telling me is that part of the reason that what they saw in me was the fact that I didn't go to film school, that I didn't have, a kind of encyclopedic knowledge of every film ever created. I didn't come in dressed all in black, talking about, hanging out with my friends, having watched these plays. The fact that I actually came from the sciences and apparently had a, much more analytical mind. The fact that I had done this documentary that, out of a box, literally like picking up a little camera and putting something together out of nothing, and without having this knowledge. And it was interesting how a lot of these parts of my story became the things that sold me more and more. The fact that I, didn't go to NYU film school. My last name wasn't, the best friend of the person who got me the job. And then also I think it was, it gave me an edge that other people didn't have. And you think in a way, okay, that you have to prepare yourself for a certain funnel, you have to have these experiences. But actually, if you have broad enough experiences, I lived in rural Africa. I was sleeping on cow dung and in mud huts for months, not showering, not, learning new languages. These are creating friendships and relationships. All of these things these are important life skills that you don't realize how these are bits and pieces that you carry through in other ways. And so when the opportunity came to work at this mini major, I just, it was a lower position. It was, it was cutting my salary in half. But I said, if I could make it here and spend the next year or two kind of growing my career and moving up the ladder within the company, then I am set for any career in Hollywood that I could ever want. And so I did that. And, along the way, I was fired and rehired. I had a moment where I lost a passport and, missed a private plane. And there was all sorts of things that happened along the way. But, I think at the back of my mind, knowing that I had made all these sacrifices in order to get there, but knowing that I also had my degree, and if all else fails, I knew I was employable, but just being so insatiably hungry for this opportunity and knowing that I had this one shot at it, really, I think, lit my fire and gave me that perseverance I needed to keep on going and focus on how do I open these doors? How do I keep my job? How do I learn in an environment where it's ultra competitive and it almost feels like everyone's trying to work against you? How do you build friendships and safe places within this ecosystem of, high intensity and, and jobs that people would kill for, at the time, and well, maybe even still. Oh. So I think it was really, it was literally having gone from, watching the Oscars on TV with my mom, staying up really late, her and I sitting together. I remember watching, the Golden Globes and the Oscars, and, then actually kind of going to being in Hollywood and, going to some, like, seeing the behind the scenes of the Oscars, going to Cannes and, hanging out with Quentin Tarantino and Uma Thurman and just being in this world. It really, it all felt like larger than life. But I think I was just so grounded in knowing that, okay, I didn't have a choice. I couldn't quite lose myself in that world. I really still had to keep my eye on the prize. I knew I was there for a reason, in order to grow my skills, in order to learn the ins and outs of producing and deal making, and knowing that I had Rio at home to come home to. And I think in a way, all of that created this perfect storm of just ambition, of priorities, of, of drive, of want, and then of inadvertently being able to be successful at it. So yeah, I think that's a long roundabout way of talking about my hows, but I think, one couldn't have come without the other. And I guess that was the point I really want to make, is that, if I wasn't a young mom, maybe that would have taken me a totally different route, in a way where I could have lost myself in this kind of very glamorous, intense life. Maybe I wouldn't have been as grounded. Maybe I wouldn't have made certain decisions that I did in order to really stay on track, and prioritize my goals rather than just have fun and go along for the ride. So I think that's something that was really important in my journey, as to like how things unfolded and when.
Mm-hmm. And, it's a testament that when we focus on whatever we focus on grows, right? Whatever we focus on, we really attract. And it is that law of attraction. And so when you choose to focus on the how versus on all of the other worries of, what am I going to do? I don't know, all of these things. And you just focus on that how, really it's, you attract in that energy, you attract in the right people, you attract in these opportunities and these doors that open in the pursuit of what you're focused on, and it's this incredible magnetization that takes place. And I will say, for just you as an individual, I say this often more to other people about you than I think I've ever said to you yourself. But you've always been and still are one of the most grounded, humblest, huge heart people, like I know, not even just woman, just like as a person, and I think of, it's true. I think of everything you've done in your life. And, before Vanessa and I started recording today, to give you the inside scoop, we were saying, like, we could pull a Joe Rogan and be on here for 3 hours, because there's so much to unpack with my girl V, and you're not just your life.
Well, we have history, both of us, I think.
But there's so much wisdom, and there's so much that you've done, that if people really knew the rooms that you've been in and the hands that you have shaped and that you've worked with, like, you would just never know. And it's created you're really one of a kind. You're so unique, and you're so grounded. So people, you can go research Vanessa, although she is fairly private in her life, even though she is showing more on Instagram. She's showing you what she's allowing us to see.
I'm trying.
More, but that's always been your heart, always. Even, and again, we don't have all the time today to talk about it, but like Vanessa was like modeling with all kinds of people that you used to listen to on your CDs and radios, like back in the day, and never, ever has that been something for you to put yourself up over other people, and you've always carried yourself very humble, very grounded when you could. I mean, you were modeling and working with some big names in high school as a teen, 14, 15, 16 years old, and even today, your kids are our kids, and in international campaigns, and you're still so grounded at the core. And it's beautiful, and it's very admirable, because it's not as often that you see it. And I know you know that.
Thank you so much. In a way, it's almost like sometimes I feel like I'm not too grounded, but just, I was reading something the other day, and I was, as you said, something about, what she wants to show on Instagram, and it said something about, that you're doing, if you don't see people in spaces, people that look like you in spaces, excelling and doing incredible things, then it's hard to believe that you can be there, like the power of role models. And a part of me was also thinking, that maybe I'm doing a disservice by not, sharing a bit more and kind of talking a bit more about the things that I'm doing, only because maybe one person could be out there and stumble on my page or stumble on this conversation, and just feel so inspired by that. Because there's one thing to be the Beyonce, but it's another thing to be a kind of an attainable role model, like someone who, is doing incredible things, and you can kind of see the clear path to how they made it, like the roadmap, and they show you that roadmap in order for you to then feel like you can achieve that. And I guess, there's still very few Black women in media behind the scenes. They're mainly all on camera, which is great, but it definitely, some of the decisions I've made, and when I've been in those when I've had a seat at that table, or when I've created my own table, as I like to say, then it's just so important that we tell stories that haven't been told before. And it's kind of our mission, and also our duty, I think, to this next generation, to just be able to not expose yourself, but just really show the world, the great things that you're doing in a way that that is still humble, but that can be really empowering. And again, especially as a woman of color, especially what you're doing now. Just when you announced it on your IG, there's a flood of comments of people who are just like, oh my goodness, like, this is the inspiration I need. This is like I can't wait to listen to it. This is exactly, even just the words, the Freedom CEO, just evokes this sense of, badass, I can do anything. And you realize, you think everyone is just operating in this way because that's how you operate. But actually it's super inspiring. And I hope in this year and going forward that I can put myself out there a bit more and do more to not show off, but to expand and amplify my world, just so young women out there can see that you can have 3 kids and still run a company, that you can still, live in an exotic country and run a international company and tell incredible stories and be a part of inspiring projects. You don't have to do one or the other, or none of the above. Just finding there's a way to make it all work. So I want to do more of that this year. And thanks for giving me this opportunity to tell my story and share whatever bits and pieces of advice and knowledge and from my own experience that could be useful for others.
I love it. Well, I can tell you with full confidence that, whatever you decide to share is the inspiration that gives courage to other women, and just young people in general, to start living and making decisions for the life that they want to live, and that it is possible. And if you're focused on it and committed, it will find its way, but it's the consistency and that dedication that you just have to keep going. And so I can't wait to see more, because that means I get to see like more of what's going on the day-to-day. And, you know, your children obviously hold my heart in a very massive way. And I'm very blessed to be connected to you in that way. We are totally like pulling a Joe Rogan. I'm like, okay, before we wrap, and this is going to not feel like a wrap up, but I think it's really important. You know, you've talked a lot about the responsibility that we have around not just raising the next generation, you know, but how we're raising that next generation and passing on that torch. And so much of your journey through now film and telling stories and using your voice through motion picture, through animated motion, I guess. I'm not the film person. Yeah. I hope I said that okay. Animated images. And, you know, Forbes Africa was very correct to note how you're changing children's entertainment through your series, Super Sema. I would love for you to just unpack that a little bit. Like, what is this series and why is it important for children today and future generations? And not just for children of color, because I know you're going to shed some light on that, but just why is this show important for children of the next generation?
Definitely. Well, let me start by talking a bit more about the series itself. So Super Sema is basically the creation of a team of incredible women. And we set out to inadvertently make the first African kids superhero series. So, you know, I became a mom. I was constantly looking for, material and stories and characters that centered my own kids, and couldn't really find anything that I felt was appropriate, that I thought was really something where they can see themselves as the hero, something where they could see the power of STEM, because it was really important to me that they love science and technology and engineering and arts and math and these kind of tough subjects that, most people dismiss as kind of the boring subjects. I really wanted to find a way to like empower that subject matter. And so we set out to, watch Black Panther, was blown away by the power of how many people went out there and, watched this all African cast of superheroes and thought, we can do the same thing, but for kids. Like, we can create this Afrofuturistic world. We can have a little girl named Sema, which in Swahili means to speak up. And
how powerful.
I think like Sema is just kind of like a 10-year-old version of me, like when I was that age, of just like this little girl who just does not give up, who's annoying, who's always speaking up, who always, has her nose into everything and always trying to like save the world, just big ideas, crazy big ideas. And that was, that was the initial vision, was let's create kind of a Black Panther for kids. And so we created these characters that were centered around Sema, and there's an evil AI robot in her village called Tabor, who has him and his bungalalas, which are his little minions, all set out to fight this evil, and they're kind of always fighting each other. And Sema finds ways to save the day, always by technovating and inventing and going into her secret lab on top of her house, and she invents things, typically with like recycled DIY type of inventions, but she's actually using real world inventions that we're using nowadays. So for example, in one of the episodes, she creates a drone that then goes out and replants all the forests in her community, and that Tabor has cut down. And that is actually what is being used currently in the Amazon. We're using drones to replant the Amazon. So it was this idea of not just empowering Black children to see themselves as the hero and to see themselves doing incredible things and wanting to maybe be an astronaut and not just a basketball player. But it was also, all these children of millennial parents like me who want our kids to be globally minded and to understand that the world is not, is not just what we see on children's entertainment, which is largely, American and which is largely white. So it was really just wanting to expand these worlds and have these conversations, see the power of STEM, see how it can be used to change the world, get kids excited and inspired to get off the screens and into the real world of making and creating and inventing. And that was the seed that we wanted to plant. So it sounds catastrophic, it sounds humongous, but actually, a 4 and a 5-year-old totally gets it. They know climate change. They know these big world problems. They're exposed to it now earlier than they've ever been before. So, showing them that Sema is going out there and taking waste and converting it into renewable energy is not a crazy far out idea. It's something that we have kids, and their parents writing to us and saying, oh my gosh, my son now, wants to be an engineer. He didn't even know what an engineer was until he saw this episode and Sema did this. And, this was so exciting. And so just planting that seed, you realize how powerful it is. And that is really what we set out to do. And we are doing it really well. We have over 100 million views on our YouTube channel. We have Oscar-winning, Emmy-winning actress, and New York Times bestseller Lupita Nyong'o, who's my co-executive producer. She's on the show, and she's also invested and a shareholder in our company. So really in it for the long run and helping us, grow the universe. And we don't want it just to be a show. We want it to be we really envision this as the Mickey Mouse of Africa, yes, from Africa to the world. So a character who then can go out on many adventures where the world is so big and rich and interesting that children, want to take the first flight to Kenya or to South Africa and, and visit the continent, a continent that is thriving, that is entrepreneurial, that is, technological. People think Africa is backwards. Africa is the first continent to adopt, mobile banking widespread. It's where all the big fintech startups are coming from. It's where there's more young people in the world than ever there was before. So Africa always just felt right as kind of the birthplace. And we have a team of, 13 women who are from every part of the globe helping us do this. We're based in Nairobi. So, most of the magic happens there, but we're on Zoom calls with 4 different time zones. We have people from all walks of life who are a part of the production and just really giving it life and color. And, and I'm just really proud of what I've done. It's one of those things where you often don't give yourself a pat on the back, but we just released our season 3 yesterday on International Women's Day. We released our first season 2 years ago on March 8th on International Women's Day again. So I'm a bit emotional because period of time is so important. It's just like shows the power of girl power with a little girl hero, but also just the power of when women get together and create these communities, this sisterhood, this when we get together and tell our stories, it's like no one can stop us.
100%.
And that's what we're doing with Sema. It's a team of women all together, and we share stories. We tell each other about our ups and downs and about what our own kids are doing at home, and, give ideas about, what Sema should be up to next. And I think it's something that I haven't seen before, having worked on traditional productions where there's not very many women in power in those seats. So it's really exciting to be a part of something like this.
It is. And I am so proud of you. And I love that the next season was just released on International Women's Day. As if you're watching, you've seen the Instagram handle has been coming up periodically on the screen. I'm also going to include everything in the show notes so that you can follow Vanessa Ford, you can follow Sema, and get all of the updates on what is coming next, because I know you're just getting started and I cannot wait. We're going to have multiple conversations, but definitely going to have you back in like 6 months. Let's update on the show and the progress. And, I think I would love even just to tease a little bit, if you're tuning in, listening. Vanessa is, this incredible mom, and has already mentioned before around that you can do both. You can be a mom in business. You can be a mom and still not lose yourself. You can be a mom and have a great marriage. There's all of these things wrapped up around what the ideals of success really look like in creating a balanced life. So when you come back, V, I want to unpack that and just give our listeners something to also look forward to hearing from you and seeing you again. And you're on the Freedom CEO podcast for all the obvious reasons. But I need to ask you this one question as we wrap up. When you think about being the CEO of your own life and the decisions you've made, how has that brought you freedom in your own life?
I think that life is a series of decisions and choices that we make. And it's not just one choice. It's not just one major decision. It's a series of tiny little decisions and choices and priorities that we create along the way in order to give us the life that we want and to create the joy and the freedom that we need. And I think for me, a big part of those choices stemmed from always choosing love and not fear. And I know that sounds quite ethereal and big, but if you want to know how free you are, you should ask yourself, how far does my love extend? How far can you choose love and not fear? And I think that's been the basis of so much of the kind of the direction that my life has gone, which has been topsy-turvy and has not been straight at all, but it's always led me to the right path, and has ultimately led me to a life that I can truly say I created, not something that just happened to me. I am, running a company that I'm doing a show that I was a part of creating. I've given birth to 3 kids who are living their best life. I've chosen to, live in Portugal, a country that provides freedom and access and natural beauty and friendship. I've managed to do all of that while still being able to do some of the fun things that I love, like doing a little modeling and, doing my clothing line and making time for friendship and family. So I think if I had done the things that, where maybe were more fear-based, decisions where, I was thinking about, okay, how can I continue to make the most money? Let me stay in my corporate job. Let me stay in London, work in a big company, and not choose to let go of that life in order to, do something a little bit differently. If I was controlled more by what I think other people think of me versus what I think of myself, then I would also probably be in a very different type of life. So choose love and follow your heart and your intuition, because they never tell you differently. They never direct you to the wrong place. And I think at that point you can find freedom.
I love that. I love that. And as you're talking, I'm pretty sure Nelson Mandela would fully agree with everything you just said. Very Nelson Mandela, like, principle, mindset, way of living and thinking, right? And when you have that amount, when you're questioning around, how much love versus the fear, and you can continue to lean into love, Nelson Mandela will tell you you're not in prison, you're not entrapped. And so that's what I was thinking about as you were speaking.
So true.
And it's such a beautiful reminder, and that's kind of even the premise on the show, is it's not always about a number in your bank account or being able to go here and there and travel whenever you want, but it's how you feel when you wake up every single morning. And so when your compass is love, and that's what you're choosing to lean into as your freedom anchor, it's so powerful and so beautiful, because you wake up every morning and you start from here feeling free first before you go out into the rest of the day. And totally. I love that.
And I think there's this conception that freedom is bought, or that you, as you said, you have to have lots of money in your bank account in order to feel free, or in order to, live this life, you must have so much money saved up. How can you live in Portugal? How do you make an income? How do you, but, I think that there's a lot to be said about if you consistently wake up, as you said, with love as your compass, and you go to bed with love in your heart, and it creates this sense of you always know your North Star. And I think when you always know your North Star, then everything just becomes, those decisions that you have to make become easier and more clear, because in essence, it's just guiding you to the place where you need to be. So that's why I said, I know it's a bit ethereal. I know it's not, it's not okay. You do this and you do this and you do this and you get here. But it's my truth. And that's, I've made those decisions that even my mom would be like, oh, this is so crazy. You have an incredibly, exciting career, stay in Hollywood, in that, why go into children's entertainment? Why start your own company? Why complicate things? Why have another child? And these are all really valid questions too. But if you're ever in a position where you just don't know what to choose and you don't know which direction to take, never take the decision that you are taking because you're afraid. Always focus on the decision that finds and brings you the most love and allows you to serve your greater purpose, and not just the immediate kind of feeling, the immediate gratitude of the safe paycheck, or, you know, the expectations of what your neighbor's doing or what your best friends are doing. You know, really think long term, really think big vision, and don't give up on that.
I love it. I love you. And we are having you back. You need to come back. We will figure that out. I don't think anybody listening is disagreeing with me. And
thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it is so my honor and my pleasure. Thank you for joining today.
Thank you. I can't wait to come back and listen to the Freedom CEO. Bye.
Thanks for tuning into the Freedom CEO podcast. If you got value out of today's show, I would love for you to leave a review, as it will help my show reach other people as well. You know what to do. Download this episode, click the like and subscribe button. If you feel like spreading more love, hop over to Instagram and share today's show in your stories. Remember to tag Shae Vidyata and the Freedom CEO. My DMs are always open, so drop me a line. I'd love to connect. Until next time, keep owning your decisions to live a life of freedom. Live a life you love.